Botlet Troll, 2 main deck Deathrite Shaman over like some other dorks. He's split Arbor Elf and Avacyn's Pilgrim 2 and 2. That's kind of weird.
Yeah, you don't see that one very often.
I feel like one of them just has to be better than the other.
I would like to think so. I've found in my testing the Avacyn's Pilgrim was the better of the two.
Yeah. And then he's got like a main deck Abrupt Decay as an additional just removal spell that he can hit. Beyond that, pretty standard stuff.
As we do see both players here, Ross on your left, Brandon on your right, and Brandon's going to start off with an Arbor Elf. The interesting things here about Ross's deck is he's going to start with an Experiment one, is that he does have 3 copies of Gorehouse Chainwalker in his 2-drop slot, which will help evolve the old Experiment 1. It is a human. And you're also going to find 2 copies of Madcap Skills here, a card that we'll bring up on the screen for you guys, as Madcap Skills is the boogeyman for some formats, and that would be your favorite limited format of all time, Gate Crash.
Madcap Skills is one of the few cards I like in that format.
Wow.
I like this was interesting. Brandon attacks with his Arbor Elf on the second turn, I think representing a 2-drop or another accelerant at that point, and Ross decides to block with his Experiment 1. Kind of tilts the hand that like he wasn't planning to evolve it, and obviously misses a land drop, plays another copy, and now we know what's up. Ross on a land light keep that's revolving currently around trying to hit a land and actually get some action. We
see a Grizzly Salvage here from Brandon. Lotless Troll, Crater of Behemoth, Thragtusk, Woodland Cemetery, and Deathrite Shamans are the cards that are turned over for that. So we'll see what Brandon is going to take off of that. But yeah, as you did say, Glenn, just a 1-lander here for Ross. Needs to draw a second one. Has 22 lands in his deck. So certainly has plenty to draw to. 21 outer, as it were. You see the Grizzly Salvage is going to resolve, and Brandon is going to take that Thragtusk and come across there. Oh, no, come across. Just played Avacyn's Pilgrim. Yep. And I think he's probably going to play a land post-combat as well. Wait for it. Wait for it. Falls of the Archangels, and does pass the turn back.
Well, that kind of implies Brandon's, doesn't have too many other lands beyond, like maybe a Cavern. I think I actually see a Cavern now. That's the only land I would hold before playing my Vault out there. That's a pretty big card to tip the Experiment 1 deck as to the presence of any earlier than you have to. Interesting that Brandon doesn't block here. I guess it's fine not to and take the 1.
Yeah, I think at this point, he can just use his life total as a resource, take a few blows here. Thragtusk is going to be gaining him much life anyway, so I don't think I would be in love with trading off my Pilgrim there.
Just like when the opponent's mana screwed, keeping them from ever building a board, especially when you're the deck that has actual card advantage. I kind of like that. Like, we know how Ross is going to win. It's going to be reducing Brandon from 19 to 0, like, as quickly as possible through getting in every point you can.
Well, Thragtusk is going to make that a lot more difficult, and you do see Thragtusk come into play here, the card that we did see off of the Grizzly Salvage for Brandon. Ross finally does draw a second land in the form of Stomping Ground. He's going to push himself down to 16. We'll see if he can gain any sort of traction here now, as you're going to see a Burning Tree Emissary going to pump up the jam for the Experiment 1.
And it looks like he was considering, he got his Evolve in before he played his Flintoff Boar, evolving again. And I imagine we just, oh wow. He attacks, gets the, I guess, trade, put that trade in quotation marks,
yes.
Since obviously we're keeping a Beast Token around. This play does have a number of upsides, the biggest one being that Brandon won't be Restoration Angeling. It tells him a lot about Brandon's hand, that a Restoration Angel is probably not there. Of course, it does play into an Angel of Serenity much more fiercely.
So you do see the Beast Token in for Brandon. Brandon's going to draw a card here. You see a Cavern of Souls in his hand. There's also a Grizzly Salvage hanging out over there as well. So we'll see how he's going to want to start off this turn. And it is going to be with the Salvage. Going to get 5 cards deeper. And those are Crater of Behemoth. Looks like 2 Overgrown Tombs, Angel Serenity, and a Unburial Rites.
Wow, that's a spicy meatball.
What do they call that? Meatball has been announced. And a spicy one, in fact. So Overgrown Tomb is going to go to Brandon's hand. And this game has just taken a turn.
Yep. Brandon can reanimate something this turn. Crater Hoof seems fine to get a bunch of damage in. Angel also seems like really bad for Ross. I don't know if Brandon could make a play this turn that would not lead to him winning the game, so long as he actually made a play.
Yes.
He also has a Lingering Souls in his hand. Like, that's the worst thing he could do this turn is cast Lingering Souls, which is also probably going to be good enough.
And, what's kind of ironic here is Brad has been hoping to see a Crater of Behemoth happen all day, and he has not been here once when a Crater of Behemoth has been cast or brought back. Ah, Brad, you should choose your lunch breaks better.
Yeah, we might even get to see 2 in this game.
So you do see the Behemoth triggering, bringing all the friends across here, and as you said, just going to make things a lot more difficult here for Ross, as you're going to see some chump blocking here. Those guys are going to get in the way. A bunch of trample damage will be applied. And at the end of this combat step, we're going to see Ross with 0 creatures and Brandon with more than 0.
I will point out, it seems like strictly better to double up on the Arbor Elf, right? I mean, I guess you take one more damage. Maybe is it lethal? 8 plus 2? No. Like, you would go to 1 or whatever, but you get to keep a guy. I mean, it doesn't really matter.
He's going to keep up his few permanents that he does have in play and move on to game 2. So, Crater Behemoth, take it down. Brad Nelson's invitational card. He wasn't even here to see it in action.
Yep.
What a bad beat.
Rough beats.
Brandon Ross up a game with the Boogeyman, playing Junk Reanimator against Ross Lennon, playing Experiment Jund. And I got a little tip here for Ross, something I've learned in my decade of playing competitive Magic. Kind of want to draw more than one land.
Yep. I just did the I was actually just doing the math in my head. Our director corrected us. Like, yeah, the Avacyn's Pilgrim, he like moved out of the red zone. Like, makes it exactly lethal damage no matter how he does it.
Sure.
So, didn't matter at all.
Heck of a Magic card that Crater of Behemoth is. Taking a look at Ross's sideboard here, and you see him kind of slipping through there. Shouldn't probably wants to board in. The obvious ones are the 3 copies of Deathrite Shaman. That's certainly a good place to start. He also has 3 copies of Duress, 2 Thundermaw Hellkites, 2 Damirad, 2 Golgari Charms, 2 Tragic Slips, and 1 Searing Seer. So you can definitely expect to see those Deathrite Shamans coming in, maybe for the Rakdos Cacklers, which aren't so impressive here. The other cards, however, you know, it's kind of a toss-up if they come in or not.
I think you definitely want Thundermaw Hellkite. It's like exactly what you want to be doing in the matchup. It lets you beat through like Angel that just comes down, removes most of your team, you just Thundermaw them to the face. Very frequently, that's going to be enough damage to close it out. And even if it's not, you've got the potential to like untap your, Rampager or another burn spell or something like that with the Thundermaw. So I think that you want Thundermaw Hellkites. I'm actually kind of interested in the Golgari Charms.
As am I. Golgari Charm is a card that we have not seen a ton of recently. Hopefully it's a card that we can bring up on the screen for you guys really quickly. The super versatile charm that, when it is good, it's actually great.
Yeah, it's pretty impressive. Its modes are like really diverse, which I think is, one of the hallmarks of a great charm. Like one of my favorite charms in Modern is Rakdos Charm, because it like comes in a bunch of matchups, but that's because all the things do super different stuff.
Yeah.
Golgari Charm, its one flaw is that it is pretty narrow. Like, none of the modes are just, like, always good. Like, Rakdos Charm, at a minimum is going to be good for, like, 2 points of damage a lot of the time, stuff like that. Golgari Charm, obviously, if you can read it now, you have to have opponent's creatures in play that can be affected by the neg1/neg1. They have to have an enchantment, or they have to be trying to kill your guys. And while those are all, like, relatively common things, you can't guarantee they're going to be going on.
The -1/-1, of course, can take care of cards like Lingering Souls and those mana accelerants in Arbor Elf and Avacyn's Pilgrim, even though he only does have 4 of those instead of your maybe traditional 6 or 7.
Correct. Moving over to Brandon's sideboard, he's got a couple interesting ones. He's running 1 Ray of Revelation, which has become pretty standard. He already has a main deck Obzat, so he's added another one of those. But the cards he's going to be most interested in this matchup are Rock's Faith Menders. He's got 2 of those. 2 more Centaur Healers. That'll bring up to a playset in the main deck. 2 more Abrupt Decays. That'll bring up to 3 of those. And maybe the Liliana the Veils. I'm not sure about them, but they feel like a good enough speed bump to bring in if he has enough cards to board out. As far as cards to board out, his own Deathrite Shaman seem pretty unexciting. I'm not sure. Maybe you trim some Mulches when you're up against the aggressive deck here, post-board, especially on the draw. Mulch is significantly worse.
Yeah, a lot of people like to board that out against the other aggressive decks, is what I've heard. I didn't know that was the philosophy, but Brad brought it up today. He likes boarding them out there, and from watching some streams and reading some articles, that's what people like to board out against the aggressive decks. I guess you just can't control it very well.
Yeah, it's always been my logic to board out cards like that, just because, especially when you're on the draw, like I'm much more likely to do it then. Otherwise, like on the play, I tend to maybe keep in 1, because it's going to be hard for me to have a hand where I'm like that annoyed to see 1 in it. I can usually find time to cast it. It's still a very good card, but on the draw, like, turn 2 Mulch is just not what you want to be doing. Like, if you hit 2 lands, you're going to have to discard a card, which obviously the Reanimator deck can take advantage of, but not always. And post-board, trying to discard a card for value is going to be even worse than usual, because you'll have to face hate.
Yeah.
So when you're transitioning to a fair game plan, you don't want to be throwing away turns and potentially cards on Mulch.
Sure. All makes sense. It's hard to see Mulch move to the board, but it does make sense to me. If you think just how the games play, as you said, it's just not ideal. When you're playing your control matchup where you want to hit lands and put things in the graveyard, use an extension of your hand, it's perfect. You have time to actually take advantage of all that stuff. When you're getting beaten down by a deck that has Experiment 1 and Madcap skills, not so much.
Yep. By the same token, I've been known to board out a couple Grizzly Salvage, something like that, against the control decks, because the card advantage from Mulch is, a lot more helpful. And when I have to face down hate, again, I'm not getting that much value out of going to the bin. I never board out like all of them, but tweaking the numbers a little bit. As we can see, just based on Brandon's list, which has like 3 4-ofs in the main deck at all, like you can clearly run some pretty wonky numbers and experience some success. And one of the reasons you can do that is because cards like Grizzly Salvage, Mulch, they get you to see so many more virtual cards over the course of the game.
Using your graveyard as an extension of your hand is why this deck is one of the more powerful decks in the format, if not the most powerful right now. So you do see both players laying out their 7 cards, looking to see if they're going to be able to keep. Ross looking for more than 1 land here and just getting off to an aggressive start. And this deck is a durable deck that does have very aggressive starts and very durable, resilient threats, but has not found a hand to be able to do that yet. As you see, a mulligan at 6, and it looks like Brandon's going to go down as well.
You know, the aggro Jund deck, Experiment Jund, it's like, to me, it's like Crypt Ripper. I don't know if you know anything about me and Crypt Ripper. The Crypt Ripper in Zendikar Draft was a card that always was awesome against me. It was like just horrible. I got beaten to death so many times by Crypt Ripper, and then every time I tried to play Crypt Ripper, it was the worst. I could never make it do anything. It was always a hasty 2/2 that became irrelevant or died.
Yes.
And that's what Experiment Jund has been to me as well. I've played the deck online a fair bit. I can never just make it work. I can't do it. I always get them to like 7 or 9, and then I'm just dead. I can never ever win again.
A lot of, you know, it's funny that you bring that up because I think everyone has experiences like that. I used to actually document those cards that were like great against me, and every time I draw, they're just like, this is just the worst card in the world. I had a lot of problems with the old Molten Ravager, the 04.
Oh,
that
yeah.
you could pump with a red.
Well, he was fantastic for me. So.
Yeah, you know, I could never really get that to work. And there's a lot of cards that I can't even think of right now that a lot of people are like, this card's awesome. And every time I play it, I'm like, this card's horrible.
Yeah.
I don't understand what you're talking about. Crypt Ripper is actually a good example of a card like that, which is, you know, when your opponent casts it, you're just like, jeez, this is so good right now. Yep. Every time you play it, it's like a 4-mana 2/2 that you can't ever sink your mana into, and it's just like, just embarrassing. Like, I've always run across stuff like that, and decks are constructed too.
Crypt Ripper even came at me in a top 8 PTQ draft when an opponent first picked it and moved into black on me.
Hey. Gotta make your move. Stand
Crypt
firm.
Ripper.
Gotta stand firm as we see a Deathrite Shaman on turn 1 here for Ross. I know
good.
the constructed deck that I think of that I allocate that principle with the most with is Tooth and Nail. Because I don't ever draw it. So I always had the mana, I never draw it. Same can be said with Scape Shift as well. We're gonna see a mountain and a Burning Emissary. Big turn coming maybe, another one.
Ooh.
Oh man, no Flint Hoof board to follow up with, but at least a good board presence to start now.
Pretty strong beat down here.
You see Ross's hand is a Tragic Slip in a land, so he's off to a nice start here. He's got the graveyard controlled pretty well, Absence Pilgrim, and we have a player on a 1-lander. Does he have the black source? Blood Crypt says he does!
Yep. He's going to take 2, and it's slippery out there. You know?
It is getting very slippery.
You got to watch for the slipperiness.
Here come the beatdowns. 2 Burning Emissaries and a Deathrite Shaman gonna come across. And a Tragic Slip to finish off that Absence Pilgrim.
Oops.
And you see in Brandon's hand, he does have a mulch, which may have led to the reason that he kept this hand, hoping to draw a second land to be able to mulch on turn 2.
Yeah. And
that's a card that, you know, we just spoke of that we might want to sideboard out in this matchup, so it may have led to keeping a very dubious hand.
Yeah, his hand is definitely not great. Note the presence of the mulch now. Like, even if he had hit the turn 2 land, he was getting attacked for 5.
Yeah. Yeah, he was still going to take it on the chin.
How exciting was that mulch?
He's going to take it on the chin even worse now as we see Dread Mangler coming across those 2 Burning Tree Emissaries and a Deathrite Shaman, and we are going to go to a third game real quick here.
Yeah. I think I would have just left the Deathrite Shaman up that turn to get an extra point, but, you know, I'm a little greedy with those kind of things.
Yeah, you are. Yeah, you are. That's right, you are. That's okay.
Yeah, it definitely worked out fine there.
So you see Ross and Brandon, will be playing a third game here. Star City Games Open Series in Orlando, Florida. If you are just joining us, Cedric Phillips, Glenn Jones here in the booth. You guys can interact with us on Twitter at SCG Live, hashtag SCGORL. Glenn's got his handy dandy computer in front of him.
I do.
Checking out the tweets. Feel free to tweet with us. You can also tweet at me at Cedric A. Phillips if you'd like. I promise I won't respond because I'm working. And that would be unprofessional to respond to your tweets while I was doing that.
What were you saying? I was tweeting.
Oh, of course. Shocking. A real shock to the system there. But do feel free to interact with us. Brad Nelson, of course, joining us as well. He is on his lunch break. He'll be back in the booth with Glenn next round for you guys as we do see Experiment Jund versus Junk Reanimator. 2 6-0s here, duking it out for 7-0 and the right to double draw into the top 8 here. And Junk Reanimator being the boogeyman, but Experiment Jund is an aggressive deck as we did see that game that, you know, can't slide underneath the Junk Reanimator before it does get going. Is this a deck, Glenn, that you think could foil the Junk Reanimator deck moving forward?
I don't. I can't make the deck win. You could give me like Black Lotuses. I just can't do it. Like, I'm sorry, it's too hard. I think Ross
strategy maybe.
Yeah. I think Ross has made some nice innovations. Madcap Skills is basically like Volcanic Strength in the matchup, doing to Junk Reanimator and other Thragtusk decks what Volcanic Strength was doing in Naya and Jund matchups. Obviously, the weakness in Volcanic Strength is that Junk Reanimator doesn't have any mountains.
Yeah.
So it's pretty useless. But Madcap Skills basically just has that exact same efficacy, and Junk, a deck that traditionally lacks actual removal spells, at least in game 1, a lot more vulnerable to a card like Madcap Skills in the main deck. I find it pretty likely, Ross has experienced some success against Reanimator over the course of the tournament. I mean, it's a big field, but there's a lot of Reanimator in it, and he's sitting here on undefeated. Hard to imagine he's dodged a matchup all day and is going to be derailed now.
But speaking of removal spells and junk Reanimator decks, you see in Brandon's deck list, he does have 1 copy of Abrupt Decay main deck. We've seen versions that have, 2 copies of Tragic Slip, maybe a couple copies of the Abrupt Decays, and even most recently we've seen versions that have copies of Orzhov's Charm in the main deck. Yeah. How do you feel about these decks having main deck removal, as I know you are someone who's been working on Standard a little bit recently?
I have been. I've been looking for something that's, fun to play and good and interesting to me. So it's been, tough.
Quite the struggle for you then.
I think that you need a removal spell mostly because of the mirror. The problem is, like, once you start getting into Angel of Serenity chains, obviously that trumps, like, any kind of removal. But there's still windows to win, Craterhoof being, like, the one that creates the biggest windows. So removal to keep your opponent off of being able to Craterhoof you, or to keep an Angel of Serenity off your back to get enough lethal damage. Things like that can actually wind up mattering a lot. So I'm a big fan of something. The spell I've liked has been Sever the Bloodline. I'm not sure how awesome it is in the actual Junk Reanimator deck. It seems fine, but it's really good against the other mid-range decks. It's a card that kills, like, whatever, literally. Olivia, Restoration Angel, Boros Reckoner, like, whatever they have presented, it will be dead now, and maybe a friend, but you also get a fair bit of value just because you're milling so much whenever you get to cast it from the graveyard. Even though it's not very efficient, it was still a free spell.
Can't complain too much about free spells. I can, but I think you're a more modest mage than I am. I don't like my free spells to cost 7 mana personally. I want them to be free of charge.
7's tough, but I mean, if it wasn't a Sever the Bloodline, you wouldn't get to cast it at all.
That's true. That's true. So we'll look at the upside of things, I suppose. So we do see both players shuffling up here. Brandon's at the ready. Ross went to his sideboard really quickly, but it looks like he's good to go here. You see Gorehouse Chainwalker in Ross's deck, where we've seen other players like an Ari Lax play Mog Flunkies, and we've seen other 2-drops in this deck. How do you feel about Gorehouse Chainwalker as a 2-drop of choice versus the other options available?
I think it's actually a pretty good call for this field specifically. The other aggressive decks in the room are not interested in blocking. Like, Naya Blitz is not going to leave, their Lightning Mauler back on defense very often or whatever. Sure. And that's, the card that probably would make the difference most of the time. It makes you a little more vulnerable to things like Bonfire for 2. But if you look at Ross's deck, like, he's already relatively resilient to that. I mean, he has Burning Tree Emissary and the Experiment 1 and whatever start, but he can usually get Experiment 1 above 2 toughness before that becomes a concern. And his opponents are going to be under a lot of pressure even if they have Bonfires, so they're going to be needing to miracle them anyway. Gorehouse Chainwalker is obviously, like, a Miracle Bonfire will kill whatever you're playing on turn 2.
Sure.
At that stage, I think it's actually pretty good. I'm interested. The other option is like Crimson Muckwader, but that's like way less consistently a 3/2.
Yeah, and we've seen some versions that are playing Lotless Troll, in that 2-drop slot. Now,
that's greedy.
That is definitely greedy for 1, and 2, it doesn't work well with Burning Tree Emissary, and you can see that Ross has built his deck with Burning Tree Emissary in mind. All the 2-drops in his deck, Flinthoof Boar, Gorehouse Chainwalker, Searing Spear, and Madcap Skills can be cast off it. Of course, Abrupt Decay and Dreadbore cannot, but, not everything's perfect all the time.
Yeah.
The mana base in Experiment Jund is definitely one of the uphill battles you have to fight.
So we do see both players are going to keep their hands. Brandon's going to lead off with an Overgrown Tomb and an Arbor Elf. Going to push himself down to 18, as we do see Ross draws an Experiment 1 for the turn. So we see he's off to a good start, but is he going to lead with a Deathrite Shaman? He is.
I don't know why we would do that here. It actually seems like it can't be right.
Surprising to me, as Experiment 1 is the what the deck is named after. It's the hallmark card in the deck.
Yep.
And to choose not to lead off with that and grow that very quickly is a bit of a surprise. But we'll see if it's going to pan out for him.
See, the thing is here, he's going to play the Experiment 1 with the Forest, but he doesn't have an Overgrown Tomb or a Woodland Cemetery to play, so like he can't keep both modes on Deathrite Shaman open. So he's going to actually be offering to Brandon which mode he even gets to use. He's obviously like expecting a Grizzly Salvage or something here, but I don't even know if Brandon has one of those. It doesn't look like it. I feel inclined to also note out that every time we have seen Arbor Elf on turn 1, it would have been better as an Avacyn's Pilgrim. Turn 1, it was Forest Arbor Elf, Forest Arbor Elf, Avacyn's Pilgrim's better, and here it's Overgrown Tomb, Arbor Elf, again, Avacyn's Pilgrim is better.
That's why you typically see 4 Avacyn's Pilgrim, 2 Arbor Elves in these Junk Reanimator decks. For those of you guys keeping track at home, we're going to see another Deathrite Shaman here, and he's just going to pass the turn. And this is a game where you have to understand what role you're playing in this matchup.
Ross has shifted. He has tried to become the control deck. and that's not what his Burning Tree, Emissary, Rakdos, Cackler, Gorehouse, Chainwalker deck is designed to do.
Yeah, not at all. Not at all. This deck cannot shift from being the control deck. It needs to put pressure on the opponent and hope that the opponent cannot, you know, do what the deck is trying to do. And Deathrite Shaman can certainly break those things up. By trying to play a longer game, you know, you forget that the Junkman deck can just play normal game Magic.
Yeah.
It is still just a mid-range deck. It is not reliant on its graveyard. I think that's a lot of the pitfalls that people have had when building their decks and their sideboards.
I would definitely turn 1 to the Experiment 1, and then probably like just turn 2 Deathrite Shaman, Shockland tapped, like maybe play the other Deathrite Shaman. I don't see like a heavy incentive to have 2 in play most of the time, but like the only play you can really be afraid of is, you know, like a Grizzly Salvage into a turn 3 Unburial Rights on something sweet. Yeah. But that's not even that likely to happen. Like, that's just a tough percentage hit to hit an Unburial Rights and a good fatty.
And one of the things that you see right now, too, is that you see that Brandon doesn't have any white mana. He has 2 Centaur Healers in his hand. He has an Angel of Serenity and a Grizzly Salvage over there. And, you know, if he was putting the pressure on, speaking of Ross, then, you know, him not having any white mana would be a huge problem. Right now, it's not much of an issue.
Yeah, he's just going to salvage for it, and life will be fine. He's missed, you know, 4 damage with that Experiment 1. At least 4, I don't know, something like that. Now he's getting in 1.
8 hands judged to the stage, please.
I don't really know why.
Yeah, you see him attacking there for 1, and he's just holding up all these spells yet again. And this is just, you know, for people who are kind of watching at home, this goes back to just role assessment of what you're trying to accomplish in a matchup, as we're going to see a Grizzly Salvage here from Brandon.
Yep. Correctly main phasing it.
You can see a Lawless Troll, a Godless Shrine, a Temple Garden, a Mulch, and a Woodland Cemetery. So white mana is online. But going back to my point about role assessment, you have to know what role you're playing in the matchup. You're not going to be able to out-control the deck that has Angel of Serenity and Thragtusk in it. And, you know, and can find the cards that it needs to with Mulch and Grizzly Salvage. That's just not realistic. You have to know that, you know, you are the aggressive deck in this matchup, and trying to play the control deck is just going to get you killed when your opponent actually does just hardcast cards like Centaur Healer, like Thragtusk, and like Angel of Serenity.
Yeah. He's on these Deathrite Shamans to try and get in his damage, basically. But A, Deathrite Shaman can't raise Thragtusk, and B, it certainly can't raise things like Centaur Healer, Thragtusk's flip side, the life gain, a Restoration Angel blinking any of those. Like, he's just not going to do it. You know, your Isochron Scepter Lightning Helix is not enough. Yeah. And especially when it doesn't fire every turn.
Yeah, now you see Thragtusk even beginning to attack. So, you know, Brandon looking at his life total, he's like, I'm at 22. Like, what am I scared of? Thragtusk, get in there. I know that Ross's deck can't play defense well, and how's it going to play defense against the Thragtusk? It's not. As you see, Dreadbore is the draw here for Ross this turn.
It's interesting. I was kind of wondering if he kept those in or not. I kind of assumed that he did. I would be more keen to board out like Abrupt Decay probably, but...
Yeah, I think, you know, there are situations where Dreadbore can be pretty good against an Angel of Serenity, maybe to get those, you know, get that out of the way and get those last points of damage through.
Even just a Restoration Angel.
Yeah, you know, you do need some removal spell like that to be able to clear the way. So you see Ross is going to take 2 here, but you can see Ross now kind of switching gears a little bit, thinking to himself, all right, like, how am I going to get through like this Centaur Healer and this Thragtusk 1, but B, how am I going to stop these giant things from attacking me?
Yeah, see, that's the weird thing about this matchup at the time. Like, he's currently on the defensive, which based on his play is exactly where he wanted to be. Like, he set himself up to be the defending player.
Yeah.
But like and it's not good for him. Like, we're watching him struggle under this particular burden, but it's the spot he put himself in.
Yeah. Now we're going to see a Gorkline Rampager trade with that 1/1 Experiment War. I think a trade that Brandon, again, is probably really happy to make with his life total sitting pretty. You know, not have to worry about Gorkline Rampager anymore. We're going to see a Rakdos Cackler post-combat. It's going to pump that, which is kind of a backwards way to go about with Evolve. But he does have access to both those Deathrite Shaman activations now, as we're going to see a Godless Shrine come into play untapped here for Brandon. 1 white mana, actually not even 1 white mana away. He can just cast Angel Serenity now.
Yep, he has the Arbor Elf. That's all he needed. Angel, this thing.
And now I'm going to clear up all of your guys, your Experiment 1, both your Deathrite Shamans, and this is why the overarching point of playing defense against the deck that has Angel Serenity and Thragtusk is not the best idea.
Right. He leaned on his board presence to try and keep things stable while he did like a relatively mediocre race. He just tapped slightly wrong. He wound up having to remove 2 creatures. I don't know if he wanted to do that or not. I think it seemed like he wanted to do 1 and 1. But yeah, now the Angel of Serenity has just, you know, created a huge tempo loss for Ross. Obviously, he can Dreadbore it and, you know, replay his guys, but he's still not like actually beating that Thragtusk that's just sitting there in play. So,
and by Dreadboring that, you know, and getting his guys back and replaying them, of course, now he's opening himself up to Unburial Rights being a real Magic card, and that's what you're going to see. You're going to see Dreadbore take care of the Angel of Serenity. Ross is going to get his guys back, but we know here in the booth, as you guys do at home, that there is an Unburial Rights right there in Brandon's hand, so that his red board is not accomplishing very much, if anything at all.
Yeah, he can replay all these guys. Angel Serenity will come back next turn, mop them all up, and game's just functionally over at that point.
So you see Deathrite Shaman going to pump that Experiment 1. You see another Experiment 1 and a Deathrite Shaman in his hand, so maybe mis-sequencing those cards a little bit.
I feel like we probably wanted to just play 2 Experiment 1s and then one Deathrite Shaman.
Yeah.
Which I think we just played another. I'm not sure exactly what play. I think we just played another Experiment 1. Yeah, we did. So kind of. And that's awkward. I know I've been in those situations before where like I made a play that was just like clearly, sequentially incorrect, and I was tempted to make another play to like conceal the error.
Yeah.
But that's like that makes it even worse.
That's just a worse play.
Yeah.
Now you're
so like
snowballing.
That's definitely just like a giant fallacy that it's really easy to trick yourself into. But sometimes you mess something up, but that doesn't mean that like the play that keeps it a secret is any better.
Yeah.
Like it just means, oh well, I messed something up. It's cool.
And now
everyone makes a mistake.
Now we see a Centaur Healer post combat. I wonder if he's able to cast that. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7.
Yeah, I don't actually think he was.
Yeah, unless there was a flashback on Burial Rights, we might have to get our game state corrected here.
Yeah.
So it looks like he is short a mana to be able to cast.
I agree.
That
I thought he would
Centaur
only
Healer.
have 2 mana left after all that action. Maybe so used to having flashback on Burial Rights that he thought he could do it again here.
Yeah, the hard cast on Burial Rights is 5 mana, of course. With Centaur Healer being 3, that's a total of 8. And assuming that he did cast on Burial Rights from the hand, which I think we both saw him do.
It's currently residing in the graveyard as well.
Yeah, he would be short.
And now, yep, they're like, here's my 5, here's my... That's 2. Like.
So there's 5 mana.
You can't target 2 lands with your Arbor Elf.
Yep.
I believe that's the confusion here. He's counting Arbor Elf as a land and also counting the Temple Guard Nitwood
That's
untap.
exactly what he's doing. And so you'll see an explanation here.
Now there is an elf that does this, but it's not this one.
It is not that one indeed. So Centaur Healer will go back to hand. We'll get life totals correct there and a game state corrected, and you say everything is rewound, and we are back to where we should be here.
Yep.
And now Rakdos Cackler is ready to battle. And Brandon says, I'm not blocking with my Angel Serenity. I will just take that. Thank you.
This game was an excellent demonstration of a number of concepts. Obviously, like, the most blatant one is, like, misassignment of role equals game loss, as put forth by one Mike Flores ages ago.
Indeed.
A verbatim quote from, I believe, Who's the B-Times article with that one.
I believe that is true, yes.
Seems appropriate at a minimum. But, you also get to see the power of a hate card, specifically Deathrite Shaman as a sideboard card. Obviously very disruptive to the Reanimator deck, but in a matchup like this one, disruption that is not backed up by pressure is completely useless. It's borderline ineffective. It is almost a mulligan.
Yes.
It's just not enough.
We saw Deathrite Shaman have very little impact on this game, and as you said, misassignment of role, where you just have to be the aggressor here. You see a Searing Spear is going to take care of Thragtusk, but again,
a township.
He does have a Gavany Township, which is going to make that bigger. And looks like we're going to see a lethal attack here. So he might be able to gain 2 life, but I think coming to the realization here that is going to be a wrap. Brandon Ross is going to win this match 2-1 over Ross Lennon, playing Junk Reanimator. We have one Junk Reanimator player moving on to 7-0. The Boogeyman is here. It ain't going anywhere, Glenn.
Not going anywhere. It's kind of funny. I've actually, I said I couldn't win with Experiment Jund, and that is true. But I have been trying. And one of the changes that I made was actually main decking Deathrite Shamans, because they really are like a pretty effective hate tool in this matchup in the Experiment Jund deck, because the deck has a lot of pressure. A 1-drop that can attack a little before turning into a disruptive element, totally fine. Rakdos Cackler, a giant pile of steaming garbage. These are all just true statements.
How dare you talk about him like that? We've done so many points of damage together.
I actually think that